Hello and welcome to It's About Youth. I'm Faye Kwan. With me in the studio today is a special guest. His name is Jeremy Fernandez. He is a journalist and presenter with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, or ABC. He was born in Kuala Lumpur, moved to Kota Kinabalu and then to Australia, but he is back now and joining me in the studio after flying in from Sydney. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. How wonderful to be back in KL. It's a very
wonderful.
special place and I'm so thrilled to be here.
Wonderful to have you here.
Thank
welcome
you.
back to KL.
Thank you.
And welcome back to Astro.
Thank you.
Well.
I did work experience here more than 20 years ago.
Right.
And that was the last time I was in this building.
How full circle to be back here
It's
then.
a full circle moment and I feel very proud to be able to come back and still be part of the industry now.
Right. I think we need to get the most important question out of the way then. Since
Yes.
you landed in KL yesterday, what was the first thing you've had to eat since you got back?
Kung Fu Chow
Okay.
with, the prawn sambal. It's one of my favourite foods in the world. And as soon as I landed, my auntie, I'm staying with family, and they know that's one of my favourite things. So we had the Kung Fu Chow, the Hokkien mee, bit of rasam, bit of rice, just good local food. Very, very satisfying.
It's that multicultural pot,
Exactly
everything different
right.
cuisines on your table.
Exactly right.
That's what it's like to be Malaysian.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm glad to hear that you are reuniting with family over here. But also speaking of family, your father himself was a journalist. He was the chief editor with the Daily Express.
Daily Express in Sabah. Yeah.
So journalism is really something that runs in the family, runs in your blood. Having that kind of upbringing in Malaysia, in your experience working in CNN in London and then back now in Australia, how would you say that sort of upbringing and global experience has kind of shaped the way you approach journalism in your career?
Do you know, it's really interesting because, as you say, my father was a journalist and I saw the work that he did. Journalism, like a lot of other jobs, it involves shift work, long hours, sometimes a bit of confrontation and conflict. And it's a job I swore that I would never want to do. When I was a child, I did not want to become a journalist like my dad.
Right.
But I fell into it, and I think part of it is a curiosity about the world. When I was a little boy growing up in KK, I was born in KL, but when I was 1 month old, we moved to KK, Kinabalu. And it was a very small town back then, and there was nothing to do. One of the things my mum used to take me to do was to go to the airport and just watch the planes at the airport.
Right.
And it's one of my first memories of realising that people lived in different places and they came and then they went to different places. And I was always curious about people being from elsewhere and living slightly different lives and what do we have in common, what do we have different. And I think that's helped shape who I am and my curiosity about the rest of the world. So, moving from KK and coming to KL very regularly and then moving to Australia, living around Australia, living overseas in the UK, helps me feel like a citizen of the world. I think I have this really strong feeling that when you travel and when you go anywhere and when you visit your hometown, you take a little piece of the place and the people with you. And that's how I feel about coming to KL. It feels like coming home. When I go to Sydney, it feels like coming home. When I go to London, it feels like coming home. And I think all those things become a part of you. And you leave a piece of yourself behind in those places as well. So that's how I think of myself now, that I kind of belong everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
It's really that saying, right? That home is where the heart is. And so you've left a little bit of piece of yourself in those different spaces. And talking about your career that spanned quite a number of decades now, 2 decades? 2 or 3 decades?
Yeah, 2.5, yeah.
2.5 decades.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have quite a lot of stories to tell, and hearing about your background, that curiosity, and also that passion for storytelling, I'm sure that's evolved a lot over the years, because especially right now, I think one thing that journalists face is, or rather a universal challenge, whether it's in the UK, Australia, or Malaysia, is misinformation and the spread of disinformation, the rapid spread of that. How would you describe then the state of misinformation and disinformation in Australia and your experience working there?
I think people's literacy about it is okay. I think it's fair, and I think it's similar in Australia to the rest of the world. As an example, when I grew up, if you wanted a piece of information, you would go to the library and you would get a book. And that was the piece of information. And if everyone was given the same assignment at school, everyone would be after that one book.
They'd be scrambling to get that out
There was
of the
no such
library
thing as
first.
computers, and certainly mobile phones weren't invented. But you could find reliable sources of information that things in books were fact, and you could rely on them. Now, you could find information on anything to prove absolutely anything you want, anytime. So the explosion in the availability of information has changed drastically in a relatively short space of time. In a couple of generations, it's really changed. And I think we're still catching up as societies in Malaysia, in Australia, and around the world with how to grapple with information that is incorrect.
Yep.
It's disinformation, misinformation. And I make that distinction because sometimes it's information that people don't realise is
Yep.
wrong.
Sometimes it's unintentional.
And sometimes it's intentional disinformation. You know, we saw that during COVID-19 when people were advised against taking vaccines. We see it in foreign interference during elections. So I think people are broadly aware that not every piece of information can be trusted, but I think it's also about educating people globally about how to find sources of information that are reliable. And I think it's a work in progress, and I think because of the availability of information around the world, my personal belief is that media literacy and digital literacy needs to be taught at a very, very young age. It
Yep.
needs to be increasingly part of the school curriculum, because it's not like it was in my day when you could just get a book. Young people should be taught how to discern information and find trusted sources.
And that's really a point that we've brought up, or has been brought up in multiple episodes throughout our program, about having it involved in the education system,
Yeah.
driving it from young, starting it from home. But really, how do we then get the point across? For you, how important is it for young people especially to have the skill of media and digital literacy?
It's a tremendously important thing. I tend to approach it in the way that I am not there trying to debunk, as a journalist, every piece of information that's put out in bad faith. It would be an impossible task for us to go out and police wrong sources of information all the time. The focus of the way I approach my journalism is that I try to be trusted, I try to be reliable and transparent in the way I gather and disseminate information. And over time, what I hope is that it builds my credibility. And so I work for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and there's a very strict set of editorial policies that are governed by government legislation that the ABC is specifically set up to serve the public. It's not to serve the ABC, it's not to serve the government, it's not to serve corporate interests, it's to serve the public. And in order to do that, we have to earn the public's trust. And that comes down to being fair and impartial in the way we report, being balanced about the way we seek information and publish information, being very, very careful. So we make sure that as much as possible what we've got is right. And sometimes it's impossible to verify information. And so we're transparent with our audiences about that and say, you know, we've tried to verify this information independently. We don't know for sure, but we give it to you, the viewer, the listener, to make up your own mind. It's my very strong belief that journalism shouldn't be about persuasion. Journalists shouldn't be mounting persuasive arguments. You know, there are historians for that. There are special interest groups and lobbyists and activists for that. But for a journalist, the primary job is to be as fair and impartial, and then hand over the information to our audiences and say, we respect you enough to be able to make your own mind up with this quality, reputable information, and then leave it at that.
At the end of the day, you're just presenting the facts.
Presenting the facts.
And that's for
Exactly
the audience
right.
to take in and then make their informed decisions.
Yeah, and it's not an act of persuasion. I think a lot of time when people look at the way we approach journalism, they think that we're up to something, that we're trying to persuade anyone. And I'm absolutely, look, I don't even have the energy to persuade people and get into arguments about, you know, kind of what they believe or what they think I'm trying to persuade them of. I'm not trying to persuade anyone as a journalist, but I want people to have good quality information so that they can make up their own minds.
You're already busy chasing your deadlines.
Yeah, exactly. We're flat out.
I'm curious though, because working with the ABC and how that audiences and the way they consume news is shifting a lot towards digital and online platforms, would you say TV broadcasting news still holds relevance?
It not only holds relevance, but certainly in Australia, television broadcasting is still the biggest form of consumption, whether you're doing it through a streaming service like Netflix, or you're watching mainstream free-to-air television like the ABC, or you're watching the equivalent of Astro, which is Foxtel in Australia. People are still watching on big screens. I use my phone a lot, and I scroll myself.
Yep.
So I consume a lot of my news on social media as well. But I guess I'm very mindful of the use of AI.
Right.
I'm very mindful of the sources where I get my information. And I'm always investigating, you know, if someone is giving me a piece of information, just wondering what is the reliability of this source? What are their motives, and can they be trusted? I think that's the thing that's always in the back of my head. And that's not to say to distrust everything out there. I think that would be a very exhausting thing as a viewer, to be constantly in a state of distrust of the information ecosystem.
Yeah.
But to just be discerning about it and to keep an open mind. And I think it's a reflection of a robust and mature society if we can have ideas openly debated rather than having them shoved into a corner of the internet, that we can have ideas openly debated and tested. And sometimes when you have a good idea or a bad idea put in front of you, you can test those ideas, and sometimes it actually can confirm your beliefs using a reputable source of information to back up what you felt might be right or what you felt might be wrong. So I think that's globally a thing we're all experiencing, this idea of how to be discerning about the sources of information that we're getting.
Definitely. I'd like to get a little bit more into that, but first let's head for a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back to It's About Youth, where today in the studio we are speaking to Jeremy Fernandez, a journalist and presenter with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Now, earlier before the break, we spoke a little bit about the relevance of TV and news broadcast today, and a slight shift in news consumption where we are also tuning into our phones and looking at news on social media. Jeremy, how has ABC sort of, or your own experience as a journalist, how have you kind of navigated this change to an audience that increasingly prefers digital and social first?
You know, when the internet first started becoming widely used as a source of information, I remember I was a radio journalist, and back then you are either a radio journalist or you're a TV journalist, and that was pretty much it. And over time, we've all become a lot more multi-skilled.
Yeah, multi-platform.
Multi-platform, and so I work mostly in TV, but I file for radio all the time. I work in radio pretty often. I've got my own podcast. I work with a different team for social media sort of output as well, and we collaborate a lot. So I think it's a dangerous thing to kind of treat them as separate entities. Journalism is very much alive and critical in our modern society.
Definitely.
It's just been transmitted in different forms. So the need for journalism remains, but the platforms with which we're doing it are changing. One of the complications is that you can't take a piece of TV and just put it on the radio. You can't take a piece of radio and turn it into a digital product. So each of these things has to be created in a bespoke way for each medium, and that can be a bit fragmenting because it takes small teams doing a bit of this and a bit of that.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and production, as you know, takes time, and it's not particularly quick sometimes. So it's an interesting thing, but it's a really interesting challenge to meet, and I think it's one that I'm not shy of. The ABC, as far as Australian media goes, has been very front-footed about being present in the digital space. So the ABC is #1 on TikTok. It is the #1, #2 news website in the country.
All right, congratulations on that.
But it's something that we've worked very hard to do,
Yep.
to be able to be front-footed and to be digitally present to meet audiences where they are. And that will continue to change over
Yep.
time. And the technology is evolving so quickly. But I think it's important that we don't think of TV as being less watched or more watched, because the work that goes into making content for TV is equally repurposed for digital audiences and for audio audiences, and vice versa. It all gets mixed together.
Yep.
So I'm very proud to be able to kind of work across all those mediums equally, and to try to reach different audiences.
So in that sense, it's not really about staying on top, but rather adapting and being quick to shift
Yeah.
and change our ways. Another challenge, though, I'd like to ask you is, along with trying to curate our content for different platforms, there's also this this sort of debate about how attention spans are shrinking, and so the content that we create is something that soon has to be downsized, made into bite-sized, digestible content for people who are constantly scrolling. Do you see that as a challenge, or just as a natural shift in all that you've mentioned?
Look, one of the things I relate to is that I'm a scroller.
Yep.
I'm on my phone all the time, and I'm doing this. And that's not how it used to be. You know, in the old days, we used to sit down and watch a TV show for half an hour, or the news that I read is a half-hour news bulletin. Sometimes it's 4 hours long, depending on if it's a breaking news event or whatever. I think it's just different because, don't forget that people might be scrolling and they'll watch maybe 57 seconds, but they'll be doing it several times a day rather than consuming everything all at one go. So it's not as if people are watching only 57 seconds of news in one day. They're just doing it much more spread out throughout the day. So I think one of the things that's important to remember is that when you're consuming information in such short bite-sized pieces, a lot of nuance is missing, a lot of detail is missing, and that can help broaden your understanding of a story, whether you're talking about issues like climate change or energy transition, which is very, very complex.
Yes,
how do we decarbonize the world's economies and shift to clean energy? I do some energy reporting from time to time, and it is immensely complex, and there's a lot of detail that's difficult to get through in a short reel on, say, Instagram or TikTok. So I think being mindful as a consumer, not to only get your news from short-form sources, but to try to broaden out and to read a little bit, to use reels and on social media, watch a bit of TV, read some magazines, to get a broader understanding of the news.
A mix of it from different sources.
Yeah. Diversity of consumption and a diversity of sources, trusted sources, is really useful and important. It helps us make, as a society, as individuals, make good decisions about the sort of place we want to live.
And the thing about this is that this sort of access to these different sources is so readily available for the younger generation now, all with their smartphones. What do you think about the notion that younger people may be more critical or more skeptical of the media now?
I think young people now are actually really smart. I think young people are a lot of the time not given enough credit for the fact that they grew up with this technology. And, for older people like me, it feels a bit new. I'm not a digital native, as they say, but my daughter is. She's completely au fait with editing videos online and looking for good sources of information and having a diversity of sources where she gets her information. So I think young people are often not given enough credit for how sophisticated they are in using different media to get their information. Having said that, I wonder whether young people realise the malicious nature with some information, the disinformation particularly, whether they understand that there is ill intention and bad faith in some of the information that's put out there in the world. And sometimes I think extreme voices, people who have very extreme views about certain things, are magnified because they are so shocking, and it shifts our perceptions of where the middle ground is. And I think most of us in society, and I compare this between Australian society, Malaysian society, we're all actually sitting somewhere in the middle. And so I think it is important for older generations to help guide young people to make sure they're not getting sucked into these extremes.
Those echo chambers.
Those echo chambers that might sound very compelling and convincing and attractive, but are actually not a reflection of reality. So I think, you know, give people the latitude and the credit, but also guide young people to make sure that, you know, they stay in the middle and they have a fair reflection of society, and that the media they're consuming is reflective of the society that they do actually live in real life, rather than online.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because when it comes, obviously social media has its benefits, but there's also the dangers of it, especially for younger people. Australia has recently moved to restrict social media platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, and even recently YouTube for those under 16. What are your thoughts on this, if you're able to comment much? Do you think bans like this are effective alongside media literacy, digital literacy campaigns, and that guidance from family?
So the legislation in Australia is not complete yet. It's still up for public debate. And it's a very complex piece of legislation that the government has put forward. It's far from resolved, I would say. Australia is perhaps very front-footed compared to the rest of the world. And what that reflects is actually a mood, not only in Australia, but the rest of the world, that people are concerned about maintaining the integrity of their information systems without being overly cautious about censorship, because we want to keep in mind that we still want to create open sources of information, and we don't want certain governments or certain corporations having the power to restrict what information we receive. So part of it is about achieving freedom, but making sure that we're protecting young people. That's the intention of this legislation. How it's enforced is actually quite a complex question, because in debating this legislation, Australia needs the big social media companies like Google and Meta to cooperate with the concerns of citizens, the aims of the government, and it's up to the media to report on this fairly. How is this going to be enforced? Does the technology exist? If you say sit in front of your computer, how is that age verification going to take place? Is it facial recognition? Is that a breach of privacy? Will it work all the time? How is a computer camera going to know if you're 15 or 17, whether you're under 16 or over 16? Some people look very young, some people look very old. And then also, you know, sometimes in the family home, the government can't be there, the police can't be there saying, oh no, you can't use TikTok, you can't use YouTube. So there are a lot of questions about it. I think we can all relate to the intention behind the legislation, but how it's enforced and how the technology and the technology companies react and relate to that is a completely different question. So I suspect that whole debate has got a bit to run, but what it does reflect is a concern about the sovereignty of our information systems and making sure that it's not overly contaminated, particularly for young people, with all sorts of misinformation and disinformation and bullying that ends up being detrimental, particularly to young people.
Because the repercussions of that then is we'll have to look into mental health for younger people. Cyberbullying is something that's rampant today. It's a huge issue today. But at the same time, it's interesting you brought up that balance, protecting younger people, but also still maintaining freedom of expression, freedom for especially youth voices to be amplified on social media, which has been such a great benefit for them. I suppose my last question for you then would be, what role then do you see younger people, whether it's aspiring journalists or TikTok content creators, what role do you see they play in defending freedom of expression today?
I think young people have, you know, not only are they sophisticated in the way they're consuming it, but they're still learning about the risks out there. I think young people are very aware of the opportunities that this great technology brings. And I think on a net basis, it has democratized information. It has helped us connect people across borders and across oceans. I think it's a really rich experience. what I would say is that we don't want to have, certainly in Australia, an information ecosystem that's so restricted that it pushes debate underground,
yep.
and people are feeling like they're missing out on information. They start to distrust their own information ecosystems. As I've said, I think it's a reflection of a mature society when we can have controversial ideas out in the open and
yep.
debate them openly and fairly. I'm very conscious that, you know, I look at my daughter, she's a teenager, and I'm very conscious that it's coming to the time where my generation is handing over to young people and saying, it's time for you now to take this over and to learn about the information ecosystems and how we collectively use that as a society to produce the lives that we want. And ultimately, we all actually want the same thing, you know, regardless of what country you're in. We want our children to be well, we want them to be educated, we want them to have opportunity
yep.
to travel, to start their own businesses, to pursue their passions, and to be safe in society. An information ecosystem that's reliable and open and fair helps us all achieve those aims. So I'm very hopeful that young people are willing to take that on and see that as a responsibility they have to safeguard not only the future of the society, but the sort of future politically, economically and culturally that they want as well.
Having that responsibility and stepping up to the role of the world that they're going to inherit.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Faye, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for your very thoughtful questions.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing your honest insights as well. This has been It's About Youth with me, Faye Kwan. I've been speaking to Jeremy Fernandez from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Thank you for watching and see you next time.